Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Investor Frame podcast. I'm super excited to have my guest and friend, Carson Demick. He's a 22-year-old entrepreneur who absolutely crushes it in the wholesaling space. I know he's started to do some other things in real estate. And, I've just always been impressed by how he approaches business. So I'm excited to have him here today to share his story. Welcome in, Carson. It's great to have you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
Awesome. So let's start by pulling apart your background. I mean, you're 22 years old. So, I say background, we're talking about like high school and that age. Like, how did you get to this point? Like, how did you get into real estate? What brought you in? And tell me a little bit about your background.
Yeah. So, like growing up, I don't think I ever really had an idea that I wanted to be in real estate at all. But I always loved the hustle. Like I always loved buying and reselling things. That was kind of that, when I got to the point of like, okay, let me decide a career path, that was what I fell back on. Like, I used to go to garage sales as a kid, buy stuff, resell it, anything I could buy and resell to make a profit. I was like all in. Like I loved doing that, from an age where like, it was like, there was obviously something more to it about what I enjoyed doing because, when I was 9, I wasn't like, oh, I want to become a millionaire. It was just like, I can buy this bouncy ball for, 25 cents and sell it for $5. Like, that's cool. Like, it's really cool.
So you were flipping from diapers, basically. You were flipping stuff.
Oh yeah, always. And we can talk about more like the fundamentals. I think that came down to, I think that'll probably come up later because I've questioned, why I do what I do, obviously. But so I think it was when I was right after I turned 18. I had graduated high school the previous spring when I was 17. I was homeschooled, so we kind of were able to, had a little bit of flexibility. I went to college starting when I was 16. I was able to through a program. And so I started to go for business. I went for 3 semesters, part-time for the first semester and the full-time for the second 2. And I never really, I never loved it. I never loved going to college out as from like an education standpoint. Like I wasn't in it for the right reasons. I loved the community aspect of it and being with, learning with other people and helping them learn and having that kind of community. But I never loved like studying, I guess. And that's probably pretty common. But so during that time, I was working as a lifeguard from 17 to 18. And when I got out of the summer of 2018, so I was 17, somebody introduced me to the idea of wholesaling real estate. And I remember I also, my buddy's dad introduced me to it, like talked to me about it. And then I also saw it on like YouTube. Ty Lopez had a guy on, Jalen White.
Yeah.
He's a young kid. He was 21. I was 18 at the time. And he was doing, 50, 100K a month, doing wholesaling. And so I started to like research what that was. And it turns out you're just kind of buying and reselling things. You're taking something and you're selling it for more for a profit. And I was like, I didn't even like feel like I really had to think about it. Like maybe I did, I don't remember. But I was able to, the way like the lifeguard shift worked, it was like you had 30 minutes on and 30 minutes off all day. So I kind of like started while I was at work, my breaks, cold calling or like researching. I ended up buying a course for like $1,000 that helped me kind of learn the fundamentals of, what the contracts look like, how to talk to certain people in the industry. So from there, I kind of just I just committed to it mentally. I was like, this is, I started going to meetups first in my local area. Like the course I bought, one awesome thing that the guy included was like a list of local meetups you could go to. So I started going to these meetups and just meeting people. And I loved that, like the social aspect of that. And I met this one guy who was doing like 10 deals a month, making on average like 5,000 a deal as far as wholesaling. That was my understanding of what he was doing. And so in my head, and he was, middle-aged guy. And I was like, but if he can do 10 a month and I see like the principle of it, and I know there's other people, young people doing it, I can do 1 a month. Like I know I have that in me. Like I can figure that out. And if, I'm living with my parents, I'm 18, if I can make $5,000 a month, like I'm still living like a king at the end of the day.
Right.
So after like that, I kind of made this commitment to just like, I'm just going to do this. This makes a lot of sense. And so it took me probably like 6 months to get my first deal. I think I had a broken foot at the time, and I was like really procrastinating, like a lot of paralysis analysis, or analysis paralysis is what they call
Mm-hmm.
it. And that kind of came down to like fear of like the unknown of cold calling. Like it's such a weird thing to pick up a phone and call someone to ask to buy their house when you never bought a house before. And so finally got over that hump and closed my first deal while I was lifeguarding. It was like an $8,000 profit.
So were you still going to school at this time?
No, at this time I don't even think I heard about wholesaling until like a couple months after I stopped going to college. And then like that summer, I kind of made the decision, like, I don't want to go back to college. I know I want to do my own thing. I've always loved doing my own thing. Let me just continue in that and chase after this real estate thing.
Well, that's a tough decision right there. And, I want to bring up, for those who are listening to this show, the idea of the title of this show is called The Investor Frame. The Investor Frame says, well, knowing what I know now, would I choose to opt into my current situation? And I think a lot of us have made our journey into entrepreneurship. We face that like crossroads at a certain point where you're just like, this thing is going to work. Like, I know I decided to go to college. I know I decided to pursue this certain career path, but at a certain point, you realize you're out of alignment. So, I guess, was that an easy transition for you to be able to say, this just isn't going to work? I don't know exactly what it's going to be, but I know it's not this.
Yeah. I would say it was a really easy transition for me to make. And I think it comes down to, like you said, what you know, and the more you've probably decided on committing towards one thing, the harder it's going to be to turn away from it. But I had never really decided to go to college in hopes of like building a career off of it. It was literally like, I can be at home and do school, or I can be at college and do school in high school. So that was the decision for me. And then another thing I'll mention too, like that made it easier. It was that summer I ran a power washing business. So I decided to it was maybe the summer before, but either way, like getting the money from that one wholesale deal and then the power washing business while I was going to college, like in my head, it completely outweighed the idea of college, because it was something that I could correlate back to. I've always wanted to do my own thing. And now I have proof that it can support me if I do it well enough. So it's just like, how do I do it well enough? So, and maybe people get confused with the opinions of their parents and others, as far as they thinking they decided to go to college to pursue a career path, when a lot of that was never really their decision, or they didn't make it because it was what they wanted. It was what they thought somebody else wanted for them. And so like maybe making that distinction could help people in their mind, as far as like, no, I never decided I wanted to follow this. So I kind of have a clear slate to figure out what I really want to do.
That's helpful. Well, and that's you're in the whale club, right? And so, we talk about a lot of these things around how it's difficult to see that for a lot of people, but the more clearly you can, I should say, the less you get attached to the expectations of what it has to be, the easier it becomes to step through it. And what I like about what you also did, we have another phrase that we talk about, micro stepping, right? So if you're going to do something new, let's take small micro steps. You still had a job, and you started figuring out how to wholesale, and you started going to meetups, and 6 months later you got your first deal, right? These are all slow progressions to get to where you had viability. Now you can point to it and you can say, there's actually something to this. So let's talk about that transition where you realized, hey, there's actually something to this. Because I know there was a point in time when I met you where you were doing close to 10 deals a month. I don't know if you were doing more or less than that, but so how did it go? Like, what was that first, first 6 months you struggled to get a deal, but what was the next, 6 months, next year like from there?
Yeah, it's kind of cool to look back on. Like I never really looked back on it. So it's cool to hear the progression, I guess, from someone else's eyes. But
yeah.
So when I closed my first deal, it honestly didn't for me, it didn't do too much just closing that deal, because in my head, like seeing the other investor do it was enough for me to like have proof of concept. Like And then me getting like, he was kind enough to let me work with him and like go hang out with him and learn from him and watch him cold call, watch him do all these steps. So I was able to see like, this isn't some master plan that he's got hidden in his closet. Like literally he's going to hang out with his buddies at 7 o'clock at night in a garage and listening to Eminem, and they're all just hitting the phones, like calling and laughing. And I was like, this is not like, that was enough. So, I mean, like, and his name was Todd. And so I'm grateful for that. Like that probably was what put me over the first mental slump or hump of like, is this real?
Mm-hmm.
Is this attainable for me? So once I did that, I got the first deal. And then it just became, I think it was really difficult for me to stay motivated by money because the reason I wanted to make money deep down that I wasn't even aware of then. And then B, the fact that I didn't need a lot of money to pay my bills because I still lived with my parents. So there was nothing, like I didn't have anything against my back. You know, if once I made that first $8,000 check, you know, in my head, it was like, I don't really have any debt. You know, my bills, this will cover my bills for however many months I want it to. So there wasn't like the force. I had to kind of find reasons and look for outside motivation because I didn't know my why, as far as why I was doing what I was doing. So it was a struggle for at least 6 months. It's always a struggle, but the first year was really hard after I closed that first deal to stay consistent. And so what kind of the progression of that to me being able to be, you know, doing what I'm doing now without needing an outside force to another person to push me towards that. That started realizing like when I started doing 10 deals a month, I needed to be with other people doing the same thing at the time. And so we ended up, me and my buddy Mike and my buddy and Todd, the guy who kind of mentored me, we started meeting together every single day and cold calling, like Monday through Saturday. We were just meeting together at the office, same time. We had, you know, Todd there who was, me and Mike had Todd there who was like a mentor to us to ask questions to. And then we had each other like at the same level going through the same thing together. So that was, you know, we did that for like a year. Just and that kind of it was weird how it worked in my mind, but it like eliminated this question in my head of like, should I get out of bed and work today? Like it was like, no, me and Mike and Todd are going to work today. We have fun. Like we're going to get deals. It's exciting. Like, let's go do it. So I went with that for like a year. And then that's at the end of that year was right about when we met.
I love that, man. So there's not a lot of downside, first of all, when you're living at home and you don't have a whole lot of bills, right? So you were making money, but your downside was like almost nothing because you're probably just pulling lists and cold calling, right? You're using your time to build that. And well, let me ask you this. Why do you think so many people, I made this mistake. I came in guns blazing and I was like, we're going to start spending money on direct mail and we're going to do, you know, PPC, and I'm going to hire cold callers before I actually know how to cold call, right? This was my mistake. Why do you think so many entrepreneurs do that? And like, how are you able to avoid that trap?
I mean, you know, social media, well, it's like, I'm trying to think of the analogy that people use, but it's like, the grass is always greener type thing. Like that, I used to struggle with like FOMO a lot in that aspect. And I think fear of missing out is what drives a lot of that, going from this to this, like the next best thing. You don't want to miss out at the end of the day. So I struggled with that for a while, but it was almost like I wasn't disciplined enough to get over, maybe that's the wrong word, but in my head, it's like I wasn't disciplined enough to get over myself to go do the things that I didn't want to do. So I always gravitated towards the marketing channel that I enjoyed the most, which was relationships. So, and I, you know, I heard something today that about memories, actually, that was like saying memories are not, you know, meant to think about or, you know, produce emotions necessarily. They're meant to like give you tools to avoid the same situation in the future or to progress further in the future. And so looking back at the memory of me in the first 6 months, all I did was go to real estate meetups and talk with people and build relationships with people. And then I looked back on that as like, I probably really enjoyed that. Like if that was the first thing I could get myself to do, And it was very easy for me to do. Like I was going to real estate meetups every single night, like if I could. And I loved every second of it. So, you know, I stuck with that as a base, but if I would have not still had those thoughts of like fear of missing out and not, watch an hour YouTube video every other day on direct mail or whatever PPC and just focused on what I wanted, I would have been way more successful just dialing in that one thing. But I got lucky in a lot of ways too, man. Like the market I was in, the timing of me becoming a wholesaler in Flint, Michigan, when there were really no other wholesalers, and then that accompanied with my love for like talking with people and meeting people. Once I started doing deals, it all just kind of crashed in, and like I became like the Flint man, is what people called me. So, and that's luck in my eyes. Like I choose to like start in Flint, Michigan. Yeah, I had to go do the meetups, but it wasn't like I had to. Like I enjoyed doing it, so that kind of really just worked in my favor as far as me being able to do so much volume at like so soon, you could say. If that answers.
Well, and so one of the things that we talk about in the Whale Club is that there's a reason why some people seem to get lucky over and over and over again. And I think you do a lot of these things naturally, inherently. You understand the concept of really how to manufacture asymmetry, and engineer your own luck, right? Because you've built a system that has very little downside. And what we learn is that like oftentimes people they focus on the wrong thing. They focus on, well, how do I get more upside? How do I become the Flint guy? Right.
Right.
And I think that's the wrong way to look at it. I can tell because of how you built it, right? You didn't set out to do that. You just set out and you did the fundamentals over and over and over consistently, right? With very, very low downside. What's the downside of getting up and going to the office and like making calls all day and you don't have a whole lot of overhead in your business? It's like there is very little. I mean, especially when you're like in your late teens, early 20s, like what's the downside? You wasted 4 or 5 hours on the phone. Right. So what? And what I love so much about you is that you might say, hey, I got lucky that it happened to be in Flint, Michigan, but there's a reason why certain people seem to get lucky over and over and over again. And I think that you're one of those people because of your approach to business. A lot of things that you do naturally just tend to lead to situations where some people might call it luck. I would just call it like engineering a situation where you tend to get lucky more often than not.
Yeah, I mean, that's true. Like you see like the same people getting lucky over and over again. And like I feel like I get lucky over and over again.
Yeah.
It's like, and it's not even like something you could brag about because like luck, like it feels like you probably feel lucky, I would assume, in some ways, like to have, the things that have happened to me and like the people that have been put into my life, that's a huge thing. I mean, that's a huge thing to be able to even put the fundamental principles like you talk about in me to be able to like, I kind of look at it like based on what you just said as go into the unknown, but trusting the principles. And it's like, when you can get over that, you almost open up room for luck, because if you're relying solely on what then that either this is going to produce $500 an hour or it's not. And then if it does, well, you earned it. Good job. Well, guess what? You got to go earn it again tomorrow. Or it doesn't produce anything. And you say, well, it just didn't work. Let me move on to the next thing because I know how this should have worked out. And so like for me, like the less I can rely on what I know and the more I can rely on principles and the foundation I have, and using that to like having faith in those, to just seek to understand those principles more. And then having faith that the end result is going to happen because the principles I'm following are good principles, which is like the only reason I joined the Whale Club was I saw that you were, and I never even I couldn't have even formulated the thoughts I'm formulating now when I joined, but it was like something about, you were starting the Whale Club to begin with. It was very new to you. It was new. I think it was, it was new to At least it's like a coaching thing. It was new to you. It was new to me as far as like the crypto world. I didn't know anything about it, but I didn't question joining it. And like looking back on it, it was because I believed in the principles that you laid out, knowing, like having faith that somebody in a leadership position, like over me in a coaching position, whatever you want to call it, that follows those principles will will just end up gaining the knowledge and understanding to be successful in like the physical world and the monetary world. And it was like, it was oddly easy for me to trust that when I joined, because of the way you went about it and starting with the foundations. I was like, there's something right about that. Like it just felt right.
It's what I learned from my mentors, right? And the guys who taught me. It all comes back to like crypto, real estate, trading stocks, like buying and selling businesses. It really doesn't matter if you don't have the underlying understanding of how to engineer luck, how to create what we call asymmetry to the upside, where like if I lose small. If I win big. I want to make those bets as much as possible. And you mentioned something, I don't know if you've heard this story, but Dan calls it naming the puppy. So the idea is, if you're naming the puppy, imagine you're going into a pet store, right? And you're just going in to browse around. And look at all these cute puppies that are here. Oh my gosh. And you go over and you're playing with them. And that pet owner, he's like giving you the puppy, and you give that puppy a name. You're like, this one is, Rocky. Oh man, Rocky's so awesome. And you're playing with Rocky, and they're like, yeah, you should take Rocky home. You're not going to, if you name that dog, you give a name to it, it's going to be really difficult for you not to take that puppy home. So the idea of naming the puppy is like, we attach our emotions to the outcomes that we want. So we say, like, I see this all the time in our business, like, I'm a fix and flipper. And what happens is they've named the puppy, and it's really hard to get off of that identity, And so what you're doing when you name the puppy and you decide so far in advance of what it needs to be, you're eliminating all other optionality that might actually get you what you want in life quicker, faster, more efficiently, right? So it's like, again, the idea of engineering luck isn't saying like, I have the perfect plan and I know exactly what's going to go right. Instead, it's like saying, I have this toolbox that I use to make good decisions. And instead of defining the thing like way in advance that needs to go right, all I need is to make good decisions on the next thing. I need the next 1 to 2 things to go right consistently, and rely on the ability to navigate that through a toolbox, through this certainty operating system that we use. And again, what I love so much about what you do, Carson, is you do a lot of these things naturally. You've got some of these things that aren't natural for most people. I know it wasn't natural for me, but you're able to start and stop something when new data presents itself. And it's like, hey, even though I decided that this is what I wanted to do, when a new path, a more efficient path forward presents itself, you're able to be like, I never named the puppy. So you're able to slide right into that optionality. And that, in my mind, is the character trait of successful people. They understand that engineering luck requires you to be like open to optionality.
Yeah, I think that like, I wouldn't have looked at myself like that in the past, especially with real estate, because I think I definitely got attached to the identities that even being like, becoming some sort of a name in the local real estate community, getting invited to speak at the local landlords association meetup, people calling me the quote Flint man, that stuff does stuff subconsciously when you hear about an opportunity in Detroit, because like you said, I've been named. And I would assume other people naming you can do almost as much damage. as you naming yourself, if you allow it to. But that's, I guess, there's always been, even throughout, the times where I've been a lot more just focused, a lot more, I guess, egotistical about what I know and who I think I am. There's always been like, inquisitive, like mindset of there's something I'm still missing. Like, because there's, on a really fundamental level, because, there is always a better option. Like there's always a better option. And so I was always open to like finding out those better options. But then what it came down to is, since I was doing it out of fear of like missing out in the future, trying to control that outcome, I never was able to follow through on the principles. Like, for example, I joined the Whale Club when I had 5 other things on my plate that I hadn't taken care of, that were not running smoothly, employees that were not being taken care of well, all this other stuff out of just self gain, like, trying to gain for myself, thinking that would bring me fulfillment or maybe put me further in the name that I had for myself in whatever way, which it didn't. But yeah, I mean, I guess I'm lucky with that too. Like, it is like, I'm grateful that I never stop to like think outside the box. And I pride myself in, I guess, being open-minded about new ideas. And it's almost like a muscle too. Like, the more you are open to change, which starts with you not focusing on the outcome, because you'll never know the outcome. So why focus on it? But you can know the principles. And once you know your principles, then you can determine which changes align with your principles. And if you're basing the actions on those, once you make those changes, if you're basing the action steps on those principles, you can do it out of intention instead of like obligation to not miss out. And then you can really thrive just off those principles, because you're not worried about the downside as much.
Yeah. I mean, your journey is just so, I mean, I would say it's, a lot of us can relate. Let's just say you've talked a lot so far about FOMO and fear. Fear manifests itself in a lot of different ways. One of the things that I found I struggled with was fear of being left behind. So for example, you go to these masterminds and I meet a 22-year-old kid who's doing 10 deals a year. And I'm like, why am I not doing 10 deals a year? Right. And so it's like a trap of comparison. You find yourself trying to compare yourself to other people. And it's really, it's really like deep down what it is fear and insecurity about what you're doing and where you're at in your journey. How have you dealt with that? How have you dealt with the fact is you took a pretty quick meteoric rise, right? And the reason you were able to do that is because you micro-step and you kept asymmetry in your favor. So you knew how to engineer luck. But your business has changed a little bit since the first time I met you. Mm-hmm. So talk to me a little bit about how you've dealt with the comparison trap and how you're building your business now to lean into your unique disposition and your particular strengths, let's say.
So the first question, how have I dealt with the comparison trap? Honestly, I never felt like I really had to deal with it too much, or I never felt like I faced it head on too much, because what I ended up doing was just gravitating toward the one thing that I was, in my eyes, ahead of almost all people my age in, which was business. And so I neglected a lot of other things that I would have really enjoyed doing, or I may have really enjoyed doing, that would have probably served my bigger purpose better long term. But in the moment, that wasn't like a thought. So it was almost like I didn't compete if I knew I was going to lose, if I wasn't going to be first. And so joining Collective Genius even was like, from the start, I kind of well, as long as I'm just on par with the other people, above 90% of them as far as my age. And I think it was more subconscious than conscious, because I would have lied to myself consciously and said, oh, I'm not doing this out of ego. I'm not doing this out of ego, but subconsciously, I thought as long as the majority of people view me this way, then I don't have to necessarily pursue growth in this area. But then it became like, well, this is the only area that you're working on. So this is really all you have going for you. So what else are you going to build? And now you have this huge support system. And now these people are expecting you to grow like they grew. And so I kind of just kept pursuing that. And then, you know, and during all that, you know, when you're pursuing it, at the end of the day for, you know, your appearance, I guess you could say, as it relates to other people, you know, you're almost like forced to have FOMO because you're worried about missing out on, like, maybe at the end of the day, what they could think about you or how you could be viewed by them. And so every little thing pops in and it's like, well, this could make me be viewed this way or make me be viewed this way. And so I kind of like got to this point where I had all of the things on a level I felt was, like, I'm not sure what the word is, but a level I felt was like superior, I guess, to maybe like the majority of my peers. And like, it sounds terrible to say, and it kind of is a terrible thing to you know, move towards. But I got that, and once I got all of that, you know, like whether it was like the cars or the money or the combination of everything, I don't even know what it was. Like, it kind of put me on my ass. Like, I had this like couple months of like, man, this is like, I don't want to get out of bed in the morning anymore. Like, what's going on? Like, I have what I've been looking for. I'm growing in this aspect. I'm hiring more employees. My business is growing. You know, I went from doing 10 deals a month by myself to now we're doing 10 deals a month and my salespeople are doing the deals. You know, I'm helping my salespeople, but I still don't feel like getting out of bed in the morning. Like, something's off. And so that was like the pinnacle of like me chasing like myself and chasing the things of this world as far as like material possessions and, you know, feeding the ego, all that kind of stuff. And then I kind of had like a paradigm shift, you could say, on a pretty large level that completely shifted my perspective of what really matters. And I think it was like inevitable, like, for that to happen, just because I hit what in my head subconsciously somewhere I needed to hit to be who I needed to be at 22. And it was like, well, shoot, I'm 22 now. Like, I'm feeling all these things of like depression or not, you know, all that kind of stuff. I've still got quite a bit of life to live. Like, I can't go on like this. Like, I got to figure something else out, because if I keep chasing this, I'm going to keep getting the same results mentally. And so it drove me to like, just at the end of the day, like, seek out understanding and like perspective from different people that I consider wise, I guess you could say. And through that kind of journey, I was able to find what, you know, I believe I'm still, you know, I was able to pretty much find out that everything I was chasing for the wrong reason. And I was able to internalize that and have this moment of realization, like, this is not what this is about. And it's not what it should be about. And it's not what brings me joy anymore. So it just changed, you know, my intentions behind everything changed. And so from there, the level I've been able to operate on has been unbelievable to me, because like on a day-to-day basis, and it's, you know, I struggle like on some days or whatever, you know, there's off days, but on the good days when I'm operating out of intention, like this new place of intention, like one example, okay, instead of doing 150 grand this month, I'm going to help my salesperson make an extra $1,000 so he can buy his kid X for their birthday. Like, when I could somehow internalize and my intention changed, my why changed from serving myself to serving others, I can operate at such a higher level, I feel like, on a day-to-day basis, because it's not about me. So I don't feel like I have to control the outcome because my needs are met. So in reality, all the things I felt obligated to do that I was doing out of obligation, I wasn't obligated to do any of them.
Yeah.
You know, my bills were paid with $3,000 a month.
I mean, and the obligations that we acquire in our businesses just become liabilities to us later, right? It's like, first of all, kudos to you for hitting your, you know, financial certainty goals, right? We got to work on your business treasury. We got to make sure that you keep that cash working for you for the rest of your life. And
Right.
We'll talk more about that. But what it sounds like you realized is like what we talk about as the first wealth commandment, which basically says we want to get closer to the things that we want without chasing more and more. And that's a hard realization when you come to in business, where you realize that more is not actually getting you closer to what you want, like another car, another $100,000 check, like another trip to wherever. And you're like, I already did that. Like,
Right.
and that fall from crap, I can't solve my happiness by just more and more and more. To have learned that at such a young age is fortunate for you, right? I
Absolutely.
believe. And so you realize that it's not about chasing more. It's about actually getting closer to the things that you want out of life. And although money is a lot of our first problems that we often can solve, that we want to solve, because for a lot of us, it's hard to see past anything. That's fine. Start with money, right? But everyone that pursues money as a goal eventually realizes that it's not all about money, that ultimately these businesses and these investments should really be helping us get closer to what our true purpose is, our true goals. I say that I like to play business as a sport. It means I want to design my life and all the businesses that I own in a way that they're very reliable. They don't take a ton of time, because I get, shiny object. Like, I want to play this business. I want to see if I can solve this problem.
Mm-hmm.
So I've designed it in a way where that's not a bad thing. Go play. I'm trying to get closer and closer to that. And it sounds like what your closer is, at least for right now. And obviously this is going to change because you're so young, right? The things that you want over time are going to continue to change. So
Right.
you've got to design this system that accounts for that, right? So right now you're getting a lot of value out of pouring into your employees, helping them solve different things. As you grow as a business owner, as an investor, as a leader, your scope is going to also change, right? So that journey of alignment is not a checkbox. I just had a great conversation earlier this year. Some people are like, figure out your why, as if it's some check box to make. It's like, well, guess what? What you wanted 3 years ago is probably very different than what you want today. It's reasonable to assume it's going to be very different than what you want 3 years from now.
Mm-hmm.
And it ties back into the whole naming the puppy concept,
Mm-hmm.
right? If you name the puppy on what your why is, and you don't give yourself ability and latitude to adjust that as more information comes in, you realize you might be able to make a bigger impact. You realize you might have a calling for something different. Well, I think you're going to be very well positioned for that, Carson, because you've already built that into your life and the way that you approach things. So I love that you had that quick realization. I guess what I would tell you is I've probably had that 2 or 3 times, right? So it'll continue to happen. And the more that we can all just continue to allow ourselves to change our mind, like, I reserve the right to change my mind. I reserve my right to adjust, and we should give ourselves that grace.
Yeah, it's crazy. Use the word grace, because it's, grace is like undeserving. So it's like giving ourselves something that we don't deserve. It's probably really difficult to do, like, mentally, especially us as like business owners, when everything's so transactional. I deserve this because I gave you this. I gave you money, you give me this. And I think that becomes difficult. And like the whole yeah, I mean, those principles, man, are like spot on, because they're hard for people to grasp, I think, that rely on what they know in the moment, to try to predict what's best for them in the future, instead of relying on those principles. But those principles are huge and are so much more broad as far as the opportunity they present to each individual, instead of like, everyone can do a lot of, well, I don't want to say that, but we think, oh, anyone, if they had $2 million, could do a lot of good, but that's not even close to as broad as someone who has those principles that you're talking about, and has the foundation of, even like what the Whale Club can provide for people, as far as having your needs met on a much more passive basis. And then also having the opportunity within that realm to work, on a day-to-day basis and grow and learn, but also to do whatever else you want to do while that treasury is working for you. That's just a much more powerful thing than make an extra 10 grand a month. And then I guess this is my last thought with that, because I think it was cool that you said it. But, we can know, like I know how much money I make every month because it's a number. I can look at it and say, like, you can't really argue it, I guess. If you got your numbers down, your numbers. And so when you're chasing that, so let's say you need to make 10 grand a month to pay your bills, you have a house, 5 kids, whatever, you need to make 10 grand a month. You spend 3 years trying to make 10 grand a month. And like, I would imagine what could happen, like even what happened to me. And I'm kind of just like realizing this as I'm saying it, but you become comfortable because money now. If I do X, I'm going to get X amount of dollars. And so it accomplished your first goal, but like you said, it might not accomplish your second goal. And so I think that's probably why it was partially hard for me to move over into a different like mindset of why, because it's like, this works so consistently. Like, I know this. I know if I go make 100 phone calls, I'm going to make an extra 5 grand. But you do that enough, and like once you hit what you really need, you just keep doing it. And then you realize like, this isn't changing, but what you're making is, and it's like, it just becomes pointless after time.
Mm-hmm. The idea is just to get all of our businesses and investments to be as reliable. We say least amount of risk, least amount of effort, most amount of options, right? And it's not because we're lazy. It's because we want to have optionality to pursue things when they change, right? You get some opportunity to help somebody. I want to be able to take that advantage of that. It's like if you're stuck in your business, that's some days it takes you 2 hours, some days it's 16 hours. I mean,
Right.
It's not exactly very predictable. Some weeks, or I should say some months I make 10 grand, some months I make 0, and some months I make 50. It's tough to build any sort of reliability or predictability around that. So yes, the idea is try to domesticate that risk as much as possible and keep your head up to be able to see optionality as it comes, right? And tell yourself it's okay to change our mind. So
yeah, and that's what those principles allow you to do, because you're not naming yourself, you're just following the principles, which like the principles that I know of the Whale Club are not like they're principles, they're not necessarily goals. Mm-hmm. And so it's like, you might not ever, it's not something that necessarily can be achieved at one point. Which is what gives you the freedom within like the Whale Club and within those guidelines, like the frame, to be able to really do whatever you want and prosper in what you really want, and still being able to stick to those throughout the whole thing. So it's a cool thing, man. I think it's like we need more. I think we need more business people talking about this kind of stuff and encouraging these frameworks within business to allow people to not only succeed in these areas and help other people succeed in financial areas, but also to give them the freedom to go do, stuff outside of that, mm-hmm. Pursue their purpose.
Whatever it may be, right? Thanks for sharing that, man. It's been a pleasure to hear you tell your story. I know you got a lot ahead of you, so we'll have to bring you back at some point and share more. Thanks for all your support with everything you've done with me in the Whale Club. If anybody wants to get in touch with you, Carson, what's the best way they could do that? If you're trying to sell houses to the Flint man, or how would they get in touch with you?
Yeah. Instagram is the best. I think it's going to be in the comments or something, but Demick, Demick 12 is my Instagram. Yep. Actually, I changed it because Carson Demick was available.
Nice.
So I was like, perfect. So Carson Demick is just my name.
Perfect. Yeah, we'll have all that in the show notes here, so you guys can go check out what Carson's up to and keep track of his progress as he continues in business and investing. So anyways, man, thanks for coming on. Thanks for sharing your story. And for everybody else, we'll see you guys on the next show.
Thanks, Paul. Appreciate it, man.